Online on DAB Digital Radio and across the Northeast on 100 to 102 FM. This is Real Radio. At 2 o'clock, here's Anna Collinson with a Real Radio News special.
1 dead, 2 seriously injured and a rural community held hostage. This is the story of Britain's most wanted man and the damage he left behind.
At 8 o'clock, I'm Trina O'Driscoll. A man's been shot dead in Gateshead. Police report a scar fell.
What sounded like a gunshot and a scream.
It doesn't happen, or didn't happen in our area.
At this moment in time, we believe the offender is a man called Raoul Moat.
This is Nick Gunman from Berkeley last night. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done.
A police officer is in a serious condition after being shot in Newcastle in the early hours of this morning.
I want you to know that you have our full attention. You need to make contact with the police now.
Raoul Moat shot the mother of his children, killed her partner and blinded a police officer. From there, he fled to Rothbury, which became the centre of one of the biggest manhunts in living memory. In a Real Radio special, we will revisit those 7 days of a man on the run and reveal the scars he has inflicted on so many. In the next 15 minutes, you will hear exclusively from one of the people who knew murdered Chris Brown best.
It is still upsetting for me, you know, I still do get emotional, I still miss him.
We speak to the police officer who got away.
The last year has been the worst year of my life.
The residents whose peaceful existence was ripped apart.
We heard the sirens through the village, people couldn't get in and out.
Yeah, he did scare quite a few people in Rothbury. I mean, who knows what he could have done.
The sheer panic of it all was overwhelming, really.
The family of people you might not consider to be victims.
Sometimes you just don't want to even get out of bed. You think, what on earth is the point to do another day like this?
And here, a Real Radio exclusive about the tourists that won't let Rothbury forget. It all started simply enough. A young karate instructor took out a girl he liked in Gateshead. But just a few hours later, Chris Brown was dead and his girlfriend was fighting for her life. They'd been shot by Samantha Stobbart's former partner who'd just been released from prison.
I don't really remember that much of that day anymore, you know. I got a phone call just to say that Chris had been shot and that he was dead, and you know, when it's someone so close to you, you don't know how to react. It is a shock to the system, and you can't comprehend what that's like unless it's something you go through yourself.
We believe the offender is a man called Raoul Moat. We believe the offender targeted his victims because of a grudge he held against them.
This is Nick Gunman from Berkeley last night. My name is Raoul Moat. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done. Now, my girlfriend has been having an affair behind my back, but one of your officers, this gentleman that I shot last night, the karate instructor.
12 minutes after this phone call, Moat, a 37-year-old former bouncer from Newcastle, shot a police officer in the face and chest as he monitored traffic. PC David Rathband, a married father of 2, was left blinded by the attack.
This was an unprovoked attack on a Northumbria police officer as he carried out his duty.
Standing at the end of a single bed with my identical twin, and to look into in fact what should be a mirror and seeing somebody's face just covered in blood and holes, and was not good. It wasn't very nice.
After 7 days on the run, an armed Raoul Moat was cornered on the riverside. Roads were closed, police snipers and negotiators were brought in, and the standoff began.
It was quite scary when you saw them all come and he was sat beside that tree.
Bob Herdman saw everything from his window. Meanwhile, his neighbour, Christine Williams, and her family were trapped within the police cordon.
We were standing at the top with the 3 children. The noises of it all was quite horrific.
Oh, I've just heard a gunshot there. Yeah, another gunshot. Dogs yelping and barking. 2 distinctive gunshots.
Almost a week after he murdered Chris Brown, the gun Raoul Moat was holding went off in his hand after a 6-hour standoff with police.
After the gunshot, you heard the tasers and things, and the worst thing was definitely the dogs. The barking was very, very eerie. When the ambulance actually passed us with him in, our youngest said, "Ma'am, he's dead." And I said, "How do you know, son?" He says, "Well, because the ambulance man in the back is sitting down, and if he was still alive, we'd be working on him, you know." And he'll never forget it.
Moat was taken to hospital in Newcastle. At 12 minutes past 3 on the 10th of July, police confirmed the week-long hunt was over and Britain's most wanted man was dead. Coming up, find out how Rothbury has been blighted by a new type of visitor.
Raoul Moat, The Aftermath, a Real Radio News special.
As the scars slowly begin to heal, the memory of what happened will never fade for Moat's victims or their families. Before they could start their grieving process, Chris Brown's family and friends had to go through the agony of waiting to bury him.
Oh, it seems like forever when you're waiting. It was actually a month between him getting shot and actually being able to go to the funeral, and that's a long time, because you just want to put him to rest.
Lee Finnegan was Chris's best friend and housemate. The pair met at a karate group and were together when Chris met Samantha.
If he was, close to a girl, then he would make her feel safe. So if she'd have mentioned, Raoul Moat or something anyway, he probably would have just went, it's going to be all right if he comes around. I'll just get rid of him. He wasn't a violent person, but he would stand his ground and not let anything happen to her.
Lee says he'll never forget the friend who always managed to make him smile.
It is still upsetting for me, I still do get emotional, I still miss him. I'll never be able to explain to people what kind of person he really was. Words can't express how he is.
PC David Rathband had been a Northumbria police constable for 11 years before the attack. The traffic officer, originally from Stafford, was an active sportsman and loved to play golf. But since losing his sight, his world has changed forever.
The last year has been the worst year of my life, my daughter's life, sons and wife's, and it's only through their hard work and determination that I've got through it.
A particularly trying time for the 43-year-old was the trial of Moat's accomplices. This came to a head when he was approached by a woman who shouted bang bang while making a gun gesture with her hand.
I took all of my energy, all of my wife's energy and my son's, to go to court to have my day of justice along with Chris Brown's family, and she absolutely ripped every strength from my body on that day.
22-year-old Kelsey Donkin from Sunderland was given a 12-month community order with supervision. Over the last year, PC Rathband has written a book, completed a marathon and raised money for his charity. The Blue Lamp Foundation offers support to those who've been injured on duty. He admits he's only started healing and will never fully recover.
I'm not foolish enough to think that I've got to get to a point where I actually deal with what's happened. I've been so busy doing other stuff for my foundation that I perhaps haven't dealt with what's happened.
Samantha Stobbart has mostly kept a low profile. Looking at pictures of the 22-year-old before last summer, she was a striking, outgoing blonde. She's now cutting a more retiring figure as a brunette, perhaps in an attempt to avoid attention. Samantha still lives in Birtley and has reportedly never returned to her former home. Her one public appearance was at Newcastle Crown Court to see Carl Ness and Kiran Awan be found guilty for assisting her former partner. Awan's family are planning to appeal against his 20-year sentence. His sister Sadaf claims he was a hostage.
He'd driven a car at the threat of his own life, at a threat against his parents and his sister, his brother-in-law and his niece. He didn't even know Raoul Moat until the day Raoul Moat got out of prison. It was just a terrible chain of events that led him to where he was.
Sadaf, who was 8 months pregnant, is devastated her brother will not be able to meet her baby. The 27-year-old mum from Blythe says, like so many others, the consequences of Moat's actions are still being felt.
Sometimes you just don't want to even get out of bed. You think, what on earth is the point to do another day like this? But you have to. You've got to get up. You've got to get on. Every day can only get better. Can't get worse. Can't get worse.
Raoul Moat, The Aftermath, a Real Radio News special.
30 miles north from Newcastle is Rothbury. Around 1,700 people live in the small Northumberland town, surrounded by dense woods. If you've never been to Rothbury, let me describe it for you. I grew up here and know it's a place where parents will not worry if their kids go out alone, or people will happily leave their doors unlocked. It has a single high street with shops and cafes, and throughout the summer tourists come here to walk through the countryside or go fishing by the river. Until July the 6th, 2010, most people had never even heard of Rothbury. The biggest thing to happen to the area was some bad flooding in 2008. But from that day, it became the infamous backdrop for one of the biggest manhunts in Britain. As the hunt for Moat intensified, Rothbury was invaded. Sirens echoed throughout the valley. Meanwhile, armed police patrolled the streets. A third of the country's officers were brought to a town with less than 2,000 people in it. And it didn't stop there, with the Army, the SAS, survival experts and an RAF Tornado jet all joining the search. Observing all of this was the world's media, including tabloid press photographer Terry Blackburn. In his 12 years in the job, he says he's never worked on a story like it, and probably never will again.
I ended up staying in Rothbury for the full 4 days. I found myself sleeping on top of the covers in my clothes, just so you could go and join the sirens. You knew that this guy had shot people, yet you were driving about through like forests or like woodland. You just didn't know where this man was, and he could have jumped out at any time and held a gun to you.
Councillor Stephen Bridget became the unofficial spokesperson for the locals. The 24-year-old admits he hated the intense media attention during that week and hardly slept from the stress.
I can't remember much of it because it was literally just one thing to the next, whether I was speaking to members of the public, the media or the police. There was so much going on, it was really hard to keep track.
Life in the small Northumberland town continues, but the community are still haunted by what happened. While Rothbury relies on tourism, the people are united in saying visitors coming for the wrong reason are not welcome. Just 2 weeks ago, we brought you a Real Radio exclusive on how sightseers are visiting Rothbury to act out Raoul Moat's final moments. Christine's house looks over the spot and has seen it happen on many occasions.
Parents bring their children and get them to lie down and pretend they've got a gun to their head, and that part of it's quite sick because, when you've actually been kind of not in it but heard what happened, you can't imagine anybody, especially mother, wanting their children to be doing that.
Christine says it's hard to move on when it's regularly reenacted outside your window. She admits it's particularly difficult for her 9-year-old son, James, who was still traumatised by what happened.
Our youngest had nightmares, ended up having to get the police before he would go to bed just to reassure him that everything was all right. The noise and the sound of it all will just never go away from either the children, my husband and myself.
Straight after the attack, businesses noticed a big drop in visitors, as Chris from the Cocotte Vale Hotel explains.
Rothbury is perceived to be somewhere which is a nice, quaint village. People come because it's quiet. I think if people perceive it as being anything different to that, they possibly stayed away.
With the summer season well underway, most businesses told me things are pretty much back to normal. But Charlotte says her parents' B&B is one of those that is still struggling.
A few months after it happened, we had an Australian couple came and they were scared when they got there, and I thought, well, it's not a scary place. But I don't know whether I would go to Whitehaven again, because you do think of that. There's just a bad atmosphere. It hangs over you.
The inquest into how Raoul Moat died will start in September. It will consider whether police tasers caused the 37-year-old to shoot himself. This is still the subject of an ongoing investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. But in Rothbury, people don't want to remember. They want their town to once again be seen as a thing of beauty, rather than the place where the Birtley gunman died. Here's Councillor Stephen Bridget.
It's certainly something that I think everyone will relate to, the children and the grandchildren, but it's not something that is holding Rothbury back, and really we don't want anyone coming up trying to remind us, and hopefully the year will mark that.
Kuramawan's family not only have to cope with their own loss, but also feel guilt over what happened to Moat's victims. Sadaf says her heart goes out to them and their families, but she could never tell them that.
What is there for us to say? What can we possibly say or do? Chris Brown lost his life, his family lost a son, Samantha Stobart was horrifically injured, PC Rathband lost his sight. What can you say to all of that? Because Raoul Moat was jealous is not a good enough reason for any of those actions to have ever happened.
On the year anniversary of being shot, PC David Rathband was told he will have to go to court to fight for damages worth up to £1 million. Northumbria Police are refusing to accept responsibility for his injuries, but PC Rathband plans to take on the fight. He says the events of last July have made him a stronger person.
I'm a lot more understanding of other people's needs, which I wasn't perhaps before. Hopefully I can leave a footprint behind for my life that people can say, do you know what? Remember that PC Rathband? He did good things instead of he got shot.
And for the family and friends of Chris Brown, the pain of losing him will never go away. But Lee says he wants to take positive things from his best friend's life rather than negative things from his death.
I hope people will remember him not with sadness, but with joy of the people he influenced and the positive impact he had on a lot of lives.
Raoul Moat, The Aftermath, a Real Radio News special.